Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unscripted. Today I have Ken Brueck from Modus. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for our little discussion today because it's actually going to talk about a lot of things I know nothing about. I know very little about VR. So you are founder of Modus, right? I'm
Right.
curious as to what got you to the point. Like what made you decide I'm gonna make this awesome VR company? What got you there? I'm curious.
A lot of pain first. There was multiple things that kind of came together. My wife and I had just built a home with one of the nation's largest builders, and our process at the design center was miserable. I think we had 30 minutes to make every decision on our home, and just being expected to imagine it all and then imagine it all the same as your spouse or anyone else. It was just so painful. And then the revision process. And I kept thinking, these are problems that should have existed half a century ago, but not now. I just kept thinking, why is this so archaic? And around the same time, the HTC Vive, which was one of the first VR headsets of this generation, came out in 2016. I put on the headset and I was just floored. And just because I was coming off of all of that pain, I immediately thought, yeah, this could solve that type of thing. And then I'd been playing with Unreal Engine by Epic, and just those things came together, and I thought, man, there's got to be something here. The AV side of it, which is where Modus plays, we play in the audio-video realm of design. Shortly after we finished our home, we then decided, all right, my wife supported me. It was me that was pushing for a nice home theater.
Sure.
And so this is where really it all came together, because a buddy of mine is an AV integrator, and we went through the whole process of me being client, him being integrator, the whole design process. And the crux of it all was, which wall should the theater go on? And he kept saying, hey, the screen should go on this wall. And I kept saying, no, it should go on this wall. I think I know how I'm going to use this space more than you do. And being the good professional that he was, he deferred to my judgment. We built it out, and it was amazing. But he was right. It really should have gone on the other wall. But the problem the whole time for me as the client was I just couldn't see his vision.
Yeah.
It wasn't clicking for me. And it became clear to me that really the problem wasn't his storytelling ability. It was really just that gap between his ability to see the potential of my space and my ability to see the potential of my space. And once we were all done, that I just thought, man, why don't these integrators have better tools? And that was the birth of it all, as we realized, yeah, there's a lot of tools out there for visualizing things. Architects use these all the time, but really, man, if it takes you a week or two to put something together, that's going to be too expensive for the average project. And it's just not going to make sense.
You're reminding me of the many home renovation projects we have done over the last decade. And when we bought this house, it was 100 years old. And immediately my brain went to work. Oh, we can do this. We can add this wall. We can take this out. And my wife would be like, you're waving your hands in the air and telling me to imagine. And I have no idea what you're talking about. So I drew every single room down to the types of tiles multiple times on an iPad. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I tried some 3D tools 5 years ago. The stuff just wasn't there yet for the average consumer to do it. Now there are. In fact, we ended up doing Hardy board on our house. And James Hardy outsourced this tool where you can literally take pictures of your house and you can basically paint it with Hardy board of whatever color. And she's like, now I get it. Yes, you can go ahead with that project, right?
Yep.
So there's definitely a need for it. And I feel like there are many contractors where they'll do this. You can have this. And the customers, I'm not sure what you mean, but sure, let's just do it. So at least drawing it out would be great. But VR takes it to a whole new level where you can walk into the room and you can see that is what I need and that's what I want. That's what's going to work. That would have helped you in your home theater.
And the other benefits to it is I would have spent less in some areas and spent more in others, right? Man, if I could have seen it, I would have been willing to spend a few extra thousand on that here and there.
Yeah.
And then some of the things that we just agonized over because I think a lot of times we have a tendency to stress over the worst case scenario. When you're dealing with construction, the cost of change is incredibly high.
Yeah.
So you just agonize over it. But if you could just see it and everyone in the project could see it the same way, a lot of that friction goes away. A lot of times you realize some of these concerns aren't even valid at all. And other times you discover things that should be concerns that you were glossing over, that you would be miserable with. But you mentioned something that's really interesting. The idea where the professional in the scenario is waving their hands and they're effectively saying, trust me. And at some point in that relationship between client and professional, there has to be trust.
Yeah.
Because you're paying them to do something and you're usually paying them a fair amount of money before anything's been done. So there's already quite a bit of trust there. But the client only has so much trust points that they have available to spend. And the professional has to be very careful about when they cash in on those trust credits. During the course of the project, they are earning trust credits, not spending them. And so, especially early in the project, the more everyone can be on the same page, the better it is. And then, 80% of the way through the project, there's a problem that comes up. And the question is, okay, how much trust does this professional have left? Have they built it up? Have they done more? Or have they siphoned it away and now there's very little left? And that type of thing really is what's going to define how well the project goes, if the client's going to give referrals when it's over, how happy they're going to be, how quick they are to pay, all of those things. And so the more you can show, the more trust there is.
Yeah, that makes really good sense. I'd really like to know how you're using Modus and VR applications for business today. We've done a lot of work together, obviously. But you also do things that are not in VR. So I think talk about VR, talk about non-VR, but then talk about what you're excited about and what's coming.
Yeah, and it's worth calling out, I'm a pretty big VR skeptic, which is a funny thing to hear from a guy that founded a VR company. But it's an important point because anytime you have a new medium, there is a mad rush to fill that medium with content. So sometimes that means porting over existing content just to help fill it with something. Other times that means we're just throwing a lot of ideas out there and seeing what sticks. For us, VR stuck in two ways. One was just the sense of presence, sense of scale, spatial awareness that you don't get any other way. The one that we leverage the most is actually speed. So when you think about creating content, especially three-dimensional content, the more traditional approach is on a 2D application, right? And if you've used 3D applications, usually it's like you have 4 views, you've got 3 orthographic views and then a perspective view. And there's always this translation going on in your brain of, okay, I'm thinking in 3D, but now I need to convert that to XYZ coordinates and all of those things. When you can work in a native 3D environment, like what VR provides, as a designer, as a professional, it enables you to move faster because that translation is no longer there. You've been learning how to work in 3D since you were born.
Yeah.
And so it's very intuitive and it's very fast. And that's, for us, the most important aspect of all. Our goal is to be able to do everything fast enough that you could do it live with a client. So when you were talking about sketching stuff out for your wife, we love that phase of the project because that's where there's the most creativity. That's where there's the most energy and momentum in the decision-making process. It's when it's the Wild West and ideas haven't been locked down. But that's also when you need to be able to see things the most too. And so that's where a whiteboard or any type of sketching application shines. That's also where they're the worst because they're not dimensionally accurate. They're bound by the abilities of the artist. And so we wanted to have something that really took the best of 3D applications in terms of being able to see things and merge that with the speed and flexibility and low cost of change of a whiteboard. So because of that, though, not everything we do is in VR. In fact, most of our customers that use Modus, they're doing it professionally with their clients, but their clients are rarely in VR. So a lot of our workflow is, hey, the operator is wearing a VR headset. They're operating Modus VR, the tool, but then they're piping that into a Teams or Zoom or Google or WebEx call. And everyone else, all of the other stakeholders are just watching a live render. And so people are saying, hey, what if we did this? What if we did that? And the operator in a native 3D environment can make that happen rapidly while everyone else is just looking at the most interesting PowerPoint they've ever seen in their lives. VR is an important component of the workflow, but not everything has to happen in VR. And once the project is done, you still need to output that into content that will fit into a more traditional workflow. We can still generate renders, we can generate 360s, we can do line drawings, because all of those things have an important role to play in most workflows. Now, the client may have had a great meeting where they saw everything happen live. They now need something to take home and look at and think about and discuss on their own time. So all of those things are an important piece of the workflow.
I was told not to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you feel about the metaverse, Ken?
This is where my skeptic hat comes in. So we get asked to do a lot of things in VR, right? And people come to us and say, hey, I had this really cool idea. How about you guys do this? For us, the benchmark is always, if you're going to do it in VR, you have to do it a lot better than what you could do outside of VR, because VR itself introduces a lot of friction. And so the barrier for entry of what we do in VR is pretty high. So when I look at the metaverse, my first question is, what does that do better than what I can do outside of VR?
Sure.
And I haven't found many compelling answers. There are some kind of interesting little surprises that happen in social applications in VR. There's an application called VR Chat, where just people hop into VR and hang out. And the amount of nonverbal communication that comes through just a moving headset and hands is remarkable. And so that's something you don't get out of normal social media like Reddit or something like that, right? Where it's just chatting. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be too disparaging. That's not to say there isn't potential for it, but their story, sure. I just kept thinking, I'd rather just do that in a browser.
It is intriguing, but like you said, it might go through 10 versions before we settle on something that's actually usable and everyone wants to use.
And that's the challenge with building any new platform. They have to build something that then other people can build on top of, which is a tall order because you're imagining someone else's imagination. And so with any of these big platforms that also are a new medium, there's a lot of time that needs to just be in the oven and have other people experiment on it. But I also think that needs to be weighed against just being realistic. With VR in particular, how much are people going to be willing to wear a headset and for how long? And can they afford it? And can they even physically handle it? There's just lots to it.
Okay, last question. What are you excited about in terms of the future?
Okay, so the obvious ones are better hardware and AI. So I don't need to talk too much about those because those get talked about all the time. When it comes to VR, what excites me is at the stage we are with a new technology, we're still in the discovery process. VR has been out now for 8 years, at least in this iteration. So to say we're still in the early days might be offensive to some. That's not my intent. But what I mean is we're really in the early days of discovering how to leverage the unique strengths of these platforms and these devices. What excites me is what we see with companies that are really investing in these very narrow use cases that go deep. So we see a lot of interesting uses of VR for therapy. I've seen HR applications use VR to help simulate difficult conversations with employees that just need empathy. That's a really interesting thing that I had never considered for VR. Obviously, training surgeons practicing surgery so that by the time they do their real surgery, they've practiced it 100, 200 times. That's incredible. The HR one is really interesting to me because it completely blindsided me, and I'm excited to be blindsided more. I want to see these interesting problems that are pushed forward because of the unique strengths of the medium. Unique strengths are the sense of presence and scale and all of that, which has some interesting implications for large data sets. Seeing it all in 3D is a very different animal. But yeah, I'm really excited about the unknown. There's going to be some exciting things there, which will all then be pushed forward by better hardware, AI, other buzzwords I could come up with. But yeah, I just want to be surprised. I love that.
That's great. Ken, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Also, thank you for the partnership. Obviously, Modus and Logitech doing a lot of great things together.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
That's it, folks. That's another episode of Unscripted. See us next time.